Once upon a time, there was a little girl called Bertha, who was extraordinarily good. She did all that she was told, she was always truthful, she kept her clothes clean, ate milk puddings as though they were jam tarts, learned all of her lessons perfectly, and was polite in her manners.
Was she pretty?
Not as pretty as any of you, but she was horribly good. She was so good that she won several medals for goodness, which she always wore pinned to her dress. There was a medal for obedience, another medal for punctuality, and a third for good behavior. They were large metal medals, and they clinked against one another as she walked. No other child in town where she lived had as many as 3 medals, so everyone knew that she must be an extra good child.
Horribly good.
Everybody talked about her goodness, and the prince of the country got to hear about it, and he said that she was so very good she might be allowed once a week to walk in his park, which was just outside of town. It was a beautiful park, and no children were ever allowed in it, so it was a great honor for Bertha to be allowed to go in there.
Were there any sheep in the park?
No, there were no sheep.
Why weren't there any sheep?
There were no sheep in the park, because the prince's mother had once had a dream that her son would either be killed by a sheep or else a clock falling on him. For that reason, the prince never kept a sheep in his park or a clock in his palace.
Was the prince killed by a sheep or by a clock?
He's still alive, so we can't tell whether the dream will come true. Anyway, there were no sheep in the park, but there were lots of little pigs running all over the place.
What color were they?
Black with white faces, white with black spots, black all over, gray with white patches, and some were white all over. Bertha was rather sorry to find that there were no flowers in the park. She had promised her aunts, with tears in her eyes, that she would not pick any of the kind prince's flowers, and she had meant to keep that her promise. So of course it made her feel silly to find that there were no flowers to pick.
Why weren't there any flowers?
Because the pigs had eaten them all. The gardeners had told the prince that you could not have pigs and flowers, so we decided to have pigs and no flowers. There were lots of other delightful things in the park. There were ponds with gold and blue and green fish in them, and trees with beautiful parrots that said clever things on a moment's notice, and hummingbirds that hummed all the popular tunes of the day. Bertha walked up and down and enjoyed herself immensely, and thought to herself, if I were not such an extraordinarily good, I should not be allowed to come into this beautiful park and enjoy all that there is to be seen in it. And her 3 medals clinked against one another as she walked, and helped to remind her of how good she really was. Just then, an enormous wolf came prowling into the park to see if it could catch a fat little pig for its supper.
What color was it?
Mud color all over, with a black tongue, pale gray eyes that gleamed with unspeakable ferocity. The first thing that it saw in the park was Bertha. She ran as hard as she could. The wolf came after her with huge leaps and bounds. She managed to reach a shrubbery of myrtle bushes and hid herself in one of the thickest of the bushes. Bertha was trembling very much at having the wolf prowling and sniffing so near her. As she trembled, the medals of obedience clinked against the medals for good conduct and punctuality. The wolf dashed into the bush, his pale gray eyes gleaming with ferocity and triumph, and dragged Bertha out and devoured her to her last morsel. All that was left of her were her shoes, bit of clothing, and the 3 medals for goodness.